Ever since we started grade school, we've all been told that we need a big, strong government to look after us. And that, sure, it may need fixing here and there, but generally today's government size is about right. We disagree. We think that government is a parasite, living off what you and I earn and using our money to do unpleasant things to us. From being a nation of self-reliant go-getters, America is fast becoming a country of government junkies. We think an alternative exists, one that puts you back in charge of your own life and destiny. We call it the freedom alternative. Good evening. I'm Peter Verderosa, and welcome to the first 1991 edition of the Freedom Alternative. And we wish you a happy, prosperous, and free new year. Today, we'll take a look at the job market. Government tells us that 6% are now unemployed, and that during 1991, that may rise to 8%. So we'll try to find out why anyone need be unemployed, and whether government makes it harder for you and me to find a job when we want one. Layoffs are quite commonplace these days, so any of us might be affected this year. First, though, let's bring you a few items from the press that came to our attention last week.
Hello, I'm Jim Davies, and Peter, I noticed an item in the Ridgefield Press. Apparently, an ex-employee of the town government has been charged with embezzling $50,000 last year. The report says the hope is to recover the money rather than to lock her up, and explains that she put it to good use in helping her needy children, which may mitigate the matter when it comes to court. What the report did not point out was that Ridgefield town government is itself stealing $50,000 from the people of that town every 15 hours, rain or shine, every day of the year, Sundays and holidays included. And that it too claims it's putting the money to good use in helping needy children, though we here would dispute that. The difference is that we victims have not the least hope of ever seeing our money again, and that no criminal charges will be brought because, unlike the alleged embezzler, this bunch of thieves wrote the law, so that their kind of theft would not be illegal. Peter, what have you found?
Jim, it seems that the new year has brought with it more regressive taxation. A major example is the new federal excise taxes that went into effect as you raised your glass 2 midnights ago. Most increased was the tax on beer and table wine, with hard liquor, liqueurs, and tobacco following a close second. In Connecticut, if you remember, these same products were hit with state excise tax increases just 2 Aprils ago. The Freedom Alternative sees the negative effects of these tax increases as very far-reaching. Lowered sales will be evident from the retail outlet, and hence all the way back to the brewer or distiller. Home winemaking and beer brewing may become popular again, and even possibly home distillation of spirits, which, by the way, is a federal offense. Here's just another example of government encouraging citizens to become criminals. And by the way, the unemployment created by the new artificial prices for adult beverages will reach back all the way to the barley, wheat, and corn fields. It's an example of incumbent politicians' lip service to altruism purely for the vote. The consumers of adult beverages didn't shout about this one at all. I guess they let politicians and organizations against alcohol consumption play on their sense of guilt about using such products.
That's not the only evil thing government was doing at midnight on December 31st. Across there in the People's Republic of California, it was trying to disarm the people of that state. Taking away privately owned guns has been a favorite trick of politicians who didn't trust the people to stay subservient. It was one of the first things Adolf Hitler did when the Nazis came to power, and you'll remember how the Soviet one did the same in Lithuania when folk there tried to go independent last year. Well, the Sacramento politicians want everybody who owns a semi-automatic gun in California to register that fact with them before January 1st, 1991. To take away guns, you have to know who has one. There are 300,000 of them, so they think. As at the evening of December 31st, only 15,000 5%, had obeyed this alleged law. 95% of these independent citizens either ignored or flouted the wishes of the government. Seems they had read the Second Amendment. It says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A whole lot better than the state politicians had.
Here's a piece of very good news from the Danbury News-Times. In late December, they did an opinion poll to find out how many readers thought the U.S. government should go to war with the Iraqi government. Last August, the national poll showed 66% supported the Bush intervention. Today, this new poll says 66% oppose the war, a complete reversal, at least locally, in 4 months. We don't know if anyone in Washington reads the News-Times, but it seems what we and many others have been saying during the fall is bearing fruit, that this proposed war is a fraud, that nothing we've been told is worth anyone dying for. On January 16th, in the Danbury, Ridgefield, Bethel area, the Freedom Alternative will go live at 8 p.m. for a full hour with a chance for you to call in and take part in a discussion about war and peace. That's the day after the UN deadline expires, so make a note to join us.
Let's turn now to our featured subject of the week, jobs and how to get them. Our guest on the show is Lou Klein, an engineer from Brookfield who has just semi-retired from ownership of an employment agency in Bridgeport. Government does have an effect on job availability. You may have seen some of these billboards actually asking the one in Hartford to save jobs by making the Connecticut economy more competitive. Since that would involve drastically reducing taxes and regulations, and since politicians only know how to increase those things, it seems to me a bit like asking a monster to roll over and die. But we wish the advertisers well anyway. In case someone you know might be job hunting this year, let's go over now and meet Lou Klein and find out what's involved. Indeed, for joining us on the Freedom Alternative today. Appreciate it very much. You've had, I think you were telling me, 21 years in the business of recruitment, finding people to work in jobs you got available, is that right?
Right, over 20 years as a professional recruiter.
And what, just to help our audience along, what does a recruiter do and what does it mean? What's the job mean?
A recruiter recruits. He tries to find specific individuals to meet the technical needs, professional needs of an employer. I work for employers who need someone to fit a particular position.
Okay.
And I go out and search and recruit to find someone who I can present, hopefully that they can employ.
Mm-hmm. And we might imagine then that I'm a person needing a job. Let's imagine that I've just been put out of work, somebody laid me off. That did happen to me. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but it happened to me a few years back.
Happened to me 3 times.
3 times, okay.
If someone can go through life and not have it happen at least once, they're very unique.
Okay.
Most people have it happen. Professional people have it happen more than once.
Well, that's good because we're both now talking from hard experience as well as from theory, you know, on both sides of the fence. Well, imagine then that's happened to me. I might be earning, let's say, $20,000 a year, $10 an hour. I'm good at my job. It's a fairly ordinary job, but you know, this is what I do, and I've just been laid off. I'm looking for a job. I'm finding it hard going. Why am I finding it hard going?
Why do you find it hard going?
Yeah.
Well,
what sort of things are in my way?
Well, the jobs, open jobs or positions looking for people are available all the time. There's a constant turnover. Every day, the job market changes. Jobs that were open yesterday are filled today, and tomorrow there are going to be new jobs open. This is happening. It's a constant change. And each employment situation is a unique one between one employer and one candidate or applicant for the position. And it's a one-on-one situation. 2 totally unique people who contract, make an employment contract. And the problem is to be presented or be in a position where you can present your credentials to someone who ought to have interest in what you've got to offer. And then the most important thing is how well you interview and convince them that they should make an offer to you. That's how you get a job.
Okay.
It's very unique, every situation.
Would I be correct in saying that The principal problem spoken of so far is one of information flow. That is, the potential employer needs to know about me and what I can do, and I need to know about him. Is this what, to summarize what you said?
Basically, it's to introduce. This is what a professional recruiter does.
Right.
He introduces a likely candidate to a likely employer,
Right.
and they have to make the employment contract. My position, I'm a broker.
Yeah.
I'm an in-between. I bring the two parties together. They have to negotiate the employment situation.
Now, it occurs to me that in any kind of society, today's society in America, or the kind of free society that we on this program would advocate, where government plays a little part, what you said so far would still apply, am I correct?
Absolutely. This is the basis of employment.
Okay.
An individual has to go, present his credentials, and convince the person that they should make him an offer. Will you accept it?
Does government do today in the United States to make this job search, which is tough enough anyway, more difficult?
Well,
What are the main things they've done?
it's my observation that any outside third-party influence on this negotiation, which restricts it or causes a restriction on this free trade between employer and the employee or the candidate, screws it up. And the government, any kind of government regulation or control that twists the employment contract and makes one party a special interest at the expense of the other, distorts it and makes employment more difficult.
Okay.
And we're wrought with all kinds of governmental restrictions.
We might look at some of them. These ways then that they regulate and make the contracting process more difficult than it would otherwise be, and thereby make it more difficult to find a job.
Well, any government law that puts some sort of specification on the employment contract. Oh, we have all kinds of things. Affirmative action requirements.
Yeah.
There are age restrictions, laws. There are things having to do with sexual preference. Any of these factors that come under some sort of legal specification distort the relationship between a potential employer and a potential candidate. Minimum wage laws, of course, or any kind of limitations or specifications on what an employer can pay or should pay, or what an employee can accept or not accept, screws it up entirely. Well, so let me give you an example. See, there are a whole lot of little black kids in the ghetto who would love to be automobile mechanics. They're fascinated with automobiles and cars, like all of us are. And they'd love to work in a gas station, pumping gas and learn how to fix clutches and things like that. But to pump gas, he'd have to be worth at least minimum wage. And doing that kind of work isn't worth minimum wage. So the employer cannot pay minimum wage.
What to do instead?
Well, he lets you pump your own gas and clean your own windshield.
Self-service.
Self-service, you do it yourself because it's too expensive to pay somebody the minimum wage. Minimum wage is too high for that caliber or that level of work. What this does, it's a terrible, devastating effect on the poor little black kid who would love to learn a skill, who would love to get in the job market. Bargain, whatever. We make value judgment. You make a value judgment, I make a value judgment. And if we're left alone in this room all by ourselves to negotiate, when the whole thing is over and you buy my watch or I buy your tie clasp or whatever, we both win. Because we do it voluntarily. When there's a third party who enters into it and tells you that you must pay a certain minimum for my watch or whatever it is, it makes me a special interest. Then when we consummate the deal, one of us is a little bit bigger winner than the other. Well, the other guy's a little bit of a loser. And this is the way American society works today. We have winners and losers in every negotiated situation. We have winners and losers. Not consensual decisions, but winners and losers.
So you would perceive then that the minimum wage regulation, just to name this one example,
that's one example,
is actively putting people out of work. It is creating unemployment.
It does.
Is that correct?
It creates unemployment, sure. Every time the minimum wage goes up, people who are earning minimum wage lose their job. Because they're no
law, which I understand now, clearly puts people out of work. It doesn't bring a real benefit to anybody. It's an illusory benefit. It makes people feel good, and that's about the lot of it. There's nobody.
The voter feels that he did a good turn for the poor, unfortunate person who is only worth minimum wage and raised his minimum wage, so he feels good. It's a matter of guilt.
It's sick.
It's a very distorted uninformed understanding of what we're talking about.
Okay.
People who think that minimum wages do any good are just uninformed. They just don't understand.
In which government makes employment more difficult by instituting the minimum wage, which cuts out, you've said, a large number of people at the bottom of the rung, black kids in the ghettos, you've exemplified, and
Poor kids, not necessarily black, they could be any.
indeed, sir.
Poor children.
But
Poor kids.
unskilled.
Unskilled.
And of course, I don't know whether we should get onto it today, but a couple of weeks ago we did a segment on the government schools, and noticed in passing on that one that the government schools are extraordinarily unresponsive to two categories, the parent and the employer.
Right.
Jan Loomis, who came on that, mentioned that the public schools the government schools have become very good at turning out assembly line workers at the very time that assembly line workers are simply not wanted anymore.
No.
And the people are screaming that they can't think. Well, this therefore adds to the impediment, I think, of the unskilled kid just entering the labour force and finding himself faced with minimum wage is simply not worth. It's a major contribution to unemployment. We agree, I think.
The failure of public education in the United States is the most important thing causing unemployment, causing poverty, causing the drug disaster. Most of the social problems of our nation are related to the failure of public education.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating. Yeah. And the thing, of course, which is very rewarding to I know you and to me is the rate with which it's coming to an end. Today's newspaper, the mayor of New Haven, is suing the state of Connecticut for what they're doing with mandated education.
Is that right?
Yes. The new mayor of New Haven, a black man, is suing the State Board of Education. And in 1991, I would venture that the whole system of financing education will go back to the people who pay for it now, the parents and the taxpayers and the consumers. They're the ones who pay for it, but they will do it with choice.
Yeah, racial, I use the word quotas because in practice that's what it is. They deny it, but it is that. And now you're coming on to a third regulation, namely age-oriented.
I said the three things: race, age, and sex.
You're surely, we'll come to sex later.
Yeah, let's come to that.
Save the best till the last. But the question of age, you would surely not advocate, would you, then, that the child labour law should be removed and that people can exploit young kids in mine shops and that sort of thing?
Well, who's deciding who's exploiting? If the kid wants the job, does he feel like he's being exploited? When he wins a job that maybe pays meager dollars, but he got the job through his own effort and his own skill, and he sold himself to an employer, he's elated. Doesn't feel exploited.
Well,
somebody else is saying he's exploited.
You've read Charles Dickens, I presume, or some of it, and seen it, and you can see what happened in 19th century England when kids were not protected. Wouldn't that happen again? That there would be a real exploitation because they would be physically damaged. They would be in conditions that they couldn't grow up in a healthy way. They would not have time or energy to learn anything in any kind of school.
When someone, whether he's an employer or anyone, does a criminal thing, when he hurts somebody else, he should be brought to justice, whether he's an employer or your neighbor or the guy you meet on the street. When someone does something criminal, they should be brought to justice. Now, if an employer requires of his employees something that impairs his health or hurts him physically, he should be brought to justice. He should get sued and make recompense. Restore. I'm a Social Security recipient, but I'm limited to how much I can work. I mean, the government says I can't earn above a certain amount. They restrict my earnings capacity by telling me if I earn too much, they'll take back some of my Social Security money.
That's kind of very, very heavy tax, isn't it?
That's very counterproductive.
Yeah,
counterproductive to somebody who wants to work.
Incidentally, is that applying it on investment income or just job income? If you had investments, for example.
Nothing has to do with earnings.
Jobs only.
The others apply regardless, whether you're working or not working.
So you're saying that the laws the government has built into the SS system, as we called it on an earlier program.
That's right, very important.
Have in fact hindered the older person in getting employment that he might like to take and is well qualified to take.
Absolutely.
And couldn't these regulations that seem to hinder the job of, or the task of finding a job. Let's come on to another one that's been mentioned, and that is the question of unemployment pay. I don't know about you, but when I was unemployed, I faced or contemplated the possibility of drawing unemployment pay. And of course, that would be the normal thing for people to do.
Certainly.
Now, do you find anything wrong with that?
It's absolutely counterproductive.
In what way?
Well, when a person loses their job through no fault of their own, they certainly qualify for unemployment compensation under the current rules and regulations. And my experience, personal and with friends and everything else, is that the longer the person can collect unemployment compensation, the less likely they are to go out and try to find a job. I mean, why work when you're being paid for not working?
But you're not paid for net under this very
Yeah, but
harrowing
it should not be mandated by government. So you don't have to be a fringe benefit offered by an employer.
But suppose he doesn't choose to offer it.
Well, then the employee can't get a job in that company that does. No, see, what our society keeps referring back to are working conditions back in Dickens' time and the exploitation of the working man and on the basis of all of Marx's works on the exploitation of the working class and all that. It's all a lot of bull in today's society. Employers can't find good people. And the way they attract good people is by offering working conditions that are better than their competitors, or fringe benefits that are superior than their competitors. And in fact, what is happening today in many companies is that when someone goes to work and applies for employment and they get hired, they have a menu of fringe benefits. They can choose which ones they want. Each person is different, depends upon their.
I was looking for a job, is that there seem to be certain jobs and professions that unless you've got some sort of license from government or a government-approved agent, you cannot do however good you are.
That's right.
I believe I read that you cannot, you can't see it on the picture, but our viewers can't see it on the picture, but there's a dog right here on the floor. And
I can't own a dog unless I own a license for it.
There is that as well, but there also the business of grooming dogs. If you want to go into business as a dog groomer in Connecticut, you have to have a government license to do that.
That's right.
And this was pretty strange, I thought. And there are lots, I looked at this bit, in Connecticut at that time, there are over 160 jobs or professions that you cannot enter without a piece of paper saying from the government.
And what this is a restriction on trade. It's an elimination of competition by the monopoly. A license or a fee to be able to perform a kind of work is no more than a tax. A license is a tax on those who want to perform a certain kind of service. And the ones who want the licensing to stay in effect and become more expensive all the time are the people who are already in the business and have a license. They want to restrict competition and keep people out who could operate without a license. Is this what happened in 1890 and what is in Harlem today? Well, all the things that they were doing of their own voluntary free will in the 1890s in the Lower East Side, today it's illegal unless you have a license.
What do you mean?
You have to paddle, to be a plumber, to be a carpenter, to do. You have to buy a license.
I had a kind of summary or conclusion here. I wonder if you could estimate in some way, by some parameter or some measure, what is the overall effect on the job market, the difficulty I have in searching for a job in my situation, being laid off, of all of these various regulations that government is putting on, the minimum wage, the racial quotas, as I'm going to call them,
I said it at the beginning,
and so on.
All unemployment is caused by some third party entering into a free trade situation and making one a special interest. Well, basically that's it.
Okay.
It may sound simplified,
So
but it's the truth.
if it weren't for intrusion, then there
Intrusion,
would not be
anybody can
employment.
find a job that he would eventually accept. If he looked long enough and hard enough, he would find somebody who would offer him a job and he'd accept it. Now, he may not be perfectly happy with it. It may be a long way from what he would consider the perfect job, but at least he may have to spend some time in it to upgrade his skills and plan for the future. But anybody can find work if they truly want to find work. It's
Very, very interesting. And I think perhaps at that point we might draw this to a conclusion. I thank you very much, Lou Klein, for coming and spending time with us.
My pleasure.
What we've learned from Lou Klein isn't the whole story about employment. I doubt anyone could fit that into 20 minutes. But what we did learn was that government has made job hunting, an already difficult task, much harder. First, by implementing a wage below which it's illegal to work, government creates unemployment out of thin air. and concentrates it among the least skilled and most vulnerable members of society. Second, they monopolize schooling, thereby making kids ill-prepared for the jobs that do await them on graduation. Third, contrary to all the highest ideals of this country, it deliberately writes laws that force employers to discriminate on the basis of race, sex, and age. Absent those laws, employers might discriminate anyway, but they would pay the cost of their prejudice because their unbiased competitors would, by enjoying lower costs, undercut their prices. The free market, in labor as in everything else, is the greatest friend minorities have. Perhaps that's why government people hate it so. Fourth, by paying for unemployment, they quite naturally buy more of it than there would otherwise be. The only surprising thing about that is that some people are too dumb to see it. Fifth, they prevent us entering a wide range of jobs or professions, from physicians to dog groomers, without an often expensive government license. And then they ask us to wonder why medical costs are so high. Once again, we've illustrated an area in which the whole activity of government is thoroughly parasitic. We'd all be far better off in its absence. In an earlier show, we demonstrated how each of us working would find ourselves 2 to 3 times richer if government as we know it were abolished. Now we see that in addition, it prevents many of those who could be working from even starting. As Lou said, in a free labor market, unemployment would be impossible.
All of the interviews conducted up to this point on the Freedom Alternative have been thoroughly fascinating, and I'm sure you'll agree that this one was no exception, thanks to the efforts and the knowledge of our producer and director, Jim Davies. Jim, if you were to suggest reading material that reflects the basic philosophy behind the Freedom Alternative, what would you tell the viewers?
Well, Peter, there's a whole library of freedom-oriented books that go into the whole freedom philosophy. There are publications, there is magazines, periodicals. Reason magazine is my favorite. That's on some of the bookstores, but you don't normally find them on the bookstores. So I would suggest, first of all, if somebody wants to get into this a little further, they should call our contact number 1-257-4844 and find out a list from us. If you still feel that we may be exaggerating the evil effect of government, watch the Freedom Alternative again next week. Same time, same channel, same day of the week. And please, if you'd like to discuss some aspect of this broadcast, don't hesitate to call that contact number. Once again, it's 1-257-4844. Until then, I'm Jim Davies, and it's good night from me.
And Peter Verderosa, have a very pleasant evening.